This is Lesson 3.4, Tools and Commands in Detail. In this lesson you'll learn how to use basic creation tools, learn how to use basic editing tools, and you'll learn how to use basic editing commands. Let's get back to Vectorworks. It's difficult for me to overstate how important this lesson is. This lesson covers all of the fundamental creation and editing tools and commands that you'll need to use Vectorworks effectively. You'll need to play this movie more than once, and you'll also need to come back and practice this exercise on a regular basis. I've even had a user who didn't go through this exercise who then asked me if there was a particular tool. That tool is actually covered in this exercise, but he couldn't see it and he didn't know it was there, and it reinforced in my mind that you need to go back through this exercise on a regular basis. Let's get started. The way this exercise has been created is a series of design layers, and each design layer has a separate exercise on it. The exercise has a title, for example the selection tool. There's a picture of the tool I want you to use. This is just a picture, and you need to click on the tool over here in order to use it. You might notice that I've got 4 tools wide on my basic palette. So let's just make that exactly the same, 4 tools wide. And we'll make that a little bit longer. So the picture here matches your basic tool palette on the left. There are a series of instructions here. Follow the steps in the instructions. When you finish the exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Now there are a lot of exercises, and you might find you have to have a couple of goes at completing this exercise. But please, remember that I've put all of these exercises here because they teach you about the fundamental tools that you will need on a daily basis. Well, let's get started with the selection tool. So first of all, I need the selection tool, that's the upward pointing arrow, and we need to learn how to select objects. Now we covered this in the very first lesson, so remember, shift click to select more than one, shift click again. You can shift click on an object that's already selected to deselect it. Right, so for that one, let's go to our Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, the Pan tool. The Pan tool is the second tool on the basic tool palette. Here it is. Click and drag, and this is visible after panning the view. Now there is a quick way to get to the Pan tool, and that is to use your middle mouse wheel button. If you're using an Apple mouse, you won't have one, so you could put your finger on the space bar, and that will activate the Pan tool. That's my finger on the space bar. Or you can use your middle mouse button. That's what I'm using right now. And then you can just drag your view. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and we'll choose the next exercise, the Zoom tool. Let's look at the Zoom tool. So it's the 4th tool across, the Zoom tool. There are 2 modes, the marquee mode and the interactive mode. With the marquee mode, you click to start and you click to finish, and the area that you define with the marquee is now fitted to my page. When you finish that, click on the Fit to Page area so you zoom back out again. The interactive mode is a little bit like the scroll wheel on your mouse. When you scroll the wheel forward, you zoom in, and when you scroll the wheel back, you zoom out. And the interactive zoom is like that. You find a point that you want to zoom in and out of, click, move your mouse up, you zoom in, move your mouse back, you zoom out. Fit to Page area again. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, the 2D locus. Here's our locus tool here, and a locus puts a marker in the drawing which doesn't get bigger or smaller whether you zoom in or out, but it is a non-printing object, which means that you can leave a locus to help you snap things together. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button, choose the next exercise down. Introduction to lines. I'm going to use my selection tool to select these lines so that I can show you. Let's start with the blue line. The blue line has got a 0 angle. If I look at my Object Info palette, I can look at my line as X and Y coordinates or lengths and angles, and that is a 0 angle. the red line is plus 45 degrees, and the magenta line is minus 45 degrees. So when you're drawing objects in Vectorworks, if you want to move them across, that's a 0 angle. If you want to move them up, that's 90 degrees. Move them down, that's minus 90 degrees. And move them across to the left is minus 180 or positive 180. They're both the same. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise. So in this exercise, we're actually going to draw lines. So there's a series of points on the layer, and we want to select the line tool, this one here, and we want to start at P1, click, and then move to P2 and click again. So notice I'm just using these little locus points so that you can snap to them. When you click, it finishes one line, so you need to click again to start the next line. One of the ways you can do it is to double click and then start the next line. Now each of these lines is an individual. So click there and back to P1. So although it looks like a polygon, this is not a polygon, it's 4 individual lines. When you finish that, we'll go to our next exercise. Lines to a length. In this exercise, I want you to learn how to draw lines to a particular length and angle. So we'll start with the line tool. Click at P1, and then we're going to type in the length that we want. If you're using the metric file, that's 3.5 meters. If you're using the imperial file, that's 12 feet. You can type in 12, hit tab once, type in the angle, 0, hit enter once, hit enter again. Now I know it's tempting for you to click at P1 then click at P2, but then you're not going to learn how to use this floating data bar. So click again, this time it's 5 feet. If you're using the metric file, that's 1500 millimeters, tab, minus 90, enter once, enter again, and so on. So this time it's 12 feet, 3.5 meters, and the distance 180 degrees, enter once, enter again. Click once to start. We want to come up 1500 millimeters or 5 feet. Tab, 90 degrees, enter once, enter again. You might be wondering, what's the point of learning how to draw lines to a length? When you draw walls, when you draw landscape areas, you're going to reuse this technique. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Lines to an angle. We're still using the line tool. Click at P1 to start. Hit the tab key once. Hit the tab key again. Type in 32 degrees. Hit the tab key once more. And then move up to P2 and click once. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Double lines. We're going to use this tool, the double line tool. There are preferences for this. Here they are here, where we can choose whether we're going to create lines, create polygons, or to create lines and polygons. We'll just try lines to start with, and the separation is about 200 millimeters or 8 inches. Click OK, click at P1, click at P2, and you'll notice that it doesn't carry on, so you have to start again, click from there to there, and click from there to there. So let me just undo those, because I'd like to show you the other options. I'm just using my keyboard shortcut to undo, and we'll go back to our preferences. This time I'll just create polygons. So click at P1, click at P2, and it stops and it creates a polygon object. From there to there, and it creates another polygon, but it doesn't join the two together. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, rectangles. There's more than one way to create a rectangle, so let's have a look at our rectangle tool and then we'll see what options we have. We can create a rectangle from corner to corner, a rectangle from center, from a midpoint, or a rotated rectangle. In this exercise we're going to use the first mode. Click at P1, click at P2, and it just creates a rectangle from those two clicks. I'm going to delete that. Now I'd like to look at the last mode, the rotated rectangle or the 3-point. click at P1, click at P2, and then click at P3, and it creates a rotated rectangle. It's still a rectangle up here, and you'll have a rotation angle for that. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Rectangles by data display. In this exercise, we want to use our rectangle tool with a floating data bar to create our rectangle. So back to the first mode, click once at P1 to start, and then we're going to use our floating data bar to control the size of our rectangle. 12 feet in the X direction and 5 feet in the Y. Enter once, enter again, and it will create the rectangle. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Rectangle from center. Back to our rectangle tool and back to the toolbar. We want rectangle from the center. Click at P1, click at P2, and notice that the rectangle is twice as large as the data bar suggests. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, rectangle midpoint. In this exercise, we want to change to our third mode, the midpoint to corner. Click at P1 and then click at P2. So you'll notice that this rectangle is probably twice as wide as you thought it would be, but it is the same height that you thought it would be. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, rounded rectangles. Back to our basic tool palette, choose the rounded rectangle tool, click at P1, click at P2. There are several options or preferences for our rounded rectangle. Do we want our corner to be proportional, or do we want it to be symmetrical? With symmetrical corners, we can set the exact size of our corners. If we choose proportional, then as we change the shape of our rectangle, it will change the size of the corners. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, circles. Back to our basic tool set, choose our circle tool. There are several ways to create a circle, and in some situations one of these will be better than the other. But you will find that there isn't a single circle creation method that works everywhere. Starting with the first mode, radius point. Click at P1, then click at P2. P1 is the center and P2 is the radius, so I get quite a large circle. Back to my toolbar, circle by diameter. Click at P1, click at P2, and it's a much smaller circle because we're defining it by its diameter rather than its radius. We'll delete that. The third mode is a circle by 3 points. Click at P1, click at P2, and P3 is the last defining point, and it creates a circle that goes through each of those 3 points. Let's find the first line, click, find the second line, click, and find the third line, click. If you do not find those lines, those 3 lines, then go back to your selection tool, click on each of those lines just to make sure that those lines are unlocked. Back to your circle tool, and then click on the first line, click on the second line, and then click on the third line. In this case, there could be more than one place that defines the location of that circle. If we choose the last mode, if we choose the fifth mode, we can click a point and then we can move along an edge to define the radius. So the first click is the edge of the circle, and then we can define where our radius is. A tangent and center mode. So we can click there, click along that line, and then we can choose the radius. But that circle will be at a tangent to my line. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Ovals. The oval tool is on the basic tool set next to the circle. We have three ways of placing the circle: by box, by rotated box, and using the center mode. Let's start with the first mode. Click at P1, click at P2, and it places my oval, and it creates a box from P1 to P2 like a rectangle, and the oval fits inside it. If we go to the second mode, the height and width, we click P1, click at P3, and then you'll notice at P2 it's quite a different shape, but that is a oval that is slightly rotated. And there's its rotation there on the Object Info palette. Back to my selection tool to delete that. So back to my oval tool. This is an oval by center, so I can click at P1, click at P3, and then click at P2, and it's using the line between P1 and P3 as my major axis, and the distance between P1 and my cursor for the minor axis. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. In this exercise, we want to learn to draw arcs. We have several different ways of drawing arcs, and each one will be better in one situation. The first one is an arc by radius. P1 is the center of my arc, P2 is my radius, and P3 is my sweep. Let's try the second mode, an arc by 3 points. Like the circle, you click at each point and the arc will go through those 3 points. An arc to a tangent, so this line is defining a tangent, and then the arc will come off that point at a tangent. This is the center mode. We start the arc, that's the end of the arc, and then we can choose the radius for that arc. Specified radius mode. So like the mode we just tried, this one we define the start and the end, and then we can type in the radius we want. 5 feet, and there's my radius, so 5 feet from there to there, or 1500 millimeters. If you start at P2 to P1 and do the same thing, the arc will go the other way. So the start and the end points are important. An arc on a point. The point on an arc mode. Click to start, click to finish, and then you can define another point to give you your height for your arc. Arc length. Click at P2, click at P1, then we can give our arc length. We might want that to be a specific length, so that's the length along the arc. We can specify the chord length. So I'm going to make this 10 feet, and we should get a very shallow arc. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down, the Freehand tool. The Freehand tool has preferences about how smooth the Freehand tool should be. I'll start with my smoothing switched to off. Okay, and I'll try and draw a line from P1 to P2 through P3 and finish at P4. Click to finish. When I zoom in, you'll see that it's a very rough looking line. I'll delete that line. Now I'm going to turn my smoothing on. So I've clicked on my preferences. Let's set the smoothing to medium, and I'll draw the same shape. Starting at P1, I'm going through P2, turn the corner at P3, and click at P4 to finish. This time Vectorworks has smoothed that out for me, and it's created a polyline, a much smoother polyline than we had previously. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. Polylines. This is the tool for creating polylines. The difference between a polygon and a polyline is that a polyline can have curves in it, and a polygon has corner vertices or pointy corners. So I'm in the corner vertex mode, so I click, 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 and double click to finish. And I get a polyline that has corner vertices. If I change to the second mode, I can click, click, and now I'm getting a Bezier curve between my points. So that area through there is a Bezier. So this area through here is a Bezier curve, and you notice that a Bezier curve starts off quite shallow and then it tightens up. A Bezier curve is a constantly changing radius along that curve. Just delete that and I'll go back to my polyline tool. The third mode is the cubic spline. So click, click, and in this case you'll notice that my polyline goes through the points that I clicked on. In the fourth mode we have the tangent arc mode. Click at that point, click at that point, and it's creating an arc that it's at a tangent to the line between P2 and P3. Click at P3 and it creates a tangent that comes out to P4. And click once again to finish. So that's an arc curve. Then it changes at a tangent to the other arc through there. Point on an arc mode. Click, click, click. Now I need another point to finish. Double click to finish. So I've got an arc to this point, then I've got another arc to that point, but the joint between the two arcs is not a tangent. This allows me to specify the arc radius that I want. Let's click on my preferences, and I can put in a fillet radius, say 4 feet, 1200 millimeters, and then I can click at P1, P2, and I will get a 4 foot or 1200 radius between my straight lines. One of the techniques I use a lot is to use the corner vertex mode, where I click, click, but at P3 I might click and drag my mouse, then let go of my mouse, and then click at P4. Click again to finish. And so it gives me the ability to create a corner vertex, a Bezier, and so on. I often use this when I'm doing projects like lighting, where I go click, click and drag, double click to finish. Click, click and drag, double click to finish. And it can be quite an easy technique for drawing my electrical drawings. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next layer down. You may not find the triangle tool easily. It's hiding underneath the polygon tool. On a Macintosh, click and hold your mouse button down. On a Windows machine, right click and you'll find the triangle tool hiding. We can create a triangle with 3 sides, 2 sides and an included angle, or a single side and 2 angles. Click, click, and then we can choose the side and OK. Which side do we want to create the triangle? Up there or down there? 2 sides and an included angle. So click there click there, and what angle do we want that to be? Let's make that 90 degrees. Enter. Which side do we want? Up there or down there? We'll go up. If you wanted it to go the other way, click there, 90 degrees, enter, and click. I'll just get my selection tool and delete those. Back to my triangle. Now we've got two angles. Click there, the first angle is 60 degrees, the second angle must be 30. Click. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next layer down, Polygons. You might remember that we found the Triangle tool hiding underneath the Polygon tool. So right-click on a Windows machine or click and hold your mouse button down on a Macintosh and go back to the 2D Polygon tool. Make sure you choose the first mode. In this part of the exercise, we'll only look at the first mode. We'll look at the other two modes in another exercise. Click at P1 to start, then P2, P3, P4, P5, and so on. If you double click at any point, it will finish your polygon, but it will not be closed. You can see there's a line missing here. You can go to the Object Info palette and close that if you want. Let's delete that. I'm going to go back to my Polygon tool. The other thing you can do is to hit the K key, kilo, on your keyboard. The K key will close your polygon, and the closing line here will always be normal or 90 degrees to that last line. So that's one way that you can close the polygon. When you finish that exercise, go to the Active Layer button and choose the next layer down. In this exercise, we want to use the Polygon tool again. That's this one here. But we want to use it in the second mode, the inner boundary mode. Some people call this the paint pot mode. When you click, Vectorworks looks for a closed boundary, and it fills that closed boundary with a polygon. If I click in this area, you notice that that area is closed, so it fills that area. If you hold the Shift key down after the first polygon and click again, it'll join the second polygon to the first one, giving you a single polygon for that entire area. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. This is the lasso mode, or the outer boundary mode. In this case, you have to make sure that you totally enclose all of the lines that make that outside boundary. If you don't, it will not fill that area. If I make sure I enclose all of those objects, it will find the shape of that outer boundary. I use this a lot for doing heavy lines around the outside of an elevation of my model. I can go to the annotation part of the viewport, I can lasso around the entire elevation, and it calculates a line or a polygon going around the whole outside of my elevation. Let's go back to the next exercise, the double polygon. This is it here, the double polygon. It's like the double line. So we can put there 8 inches like we did for the double line, or 200 millimeters. And we can either have the left control, the center control, the right or bottom, or somewhere else. So let's start with the top control line. So as I click and go round, unlike the double line, you might notice that this is creating a polygon that goes around. If we go back to our preferences, you can see we can create lines, we can create polygons, or we can create both. When we did a similar exercise with the double line tool, every time we got to the second click, it finished. This time it creates a polygon. If I go back to where I started, it does join the polygon just here. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next layer down, the regular polygon. The regular polygon is used for creating regular sided polygons. So it can be inscribed, circumscribed, or the edge. And you type in the number of sides here, and it can be any number. So let's start with P1 to P2. Now I'll try the circumscribed, P1 to P2. Slightly different size. And now I'm going to try this one here, the edge mode. So click at P3, click at P4, and there's my polygon. If I click at P3 and then Control key, you can see it draws on the other side. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise down. The spiral. Here's our spiral tool here, and the spiral has some preferences. So my distance per turn, 3 feet, 36 inches. The number of turns, 4. The start radius, 18 inches or 450 millimeters. I'll have a look at this degree increment in a minute, and I want that to be 24 inches for the thickness. So there's my spiral. So if I change this degree increment to 30 degrees, you can see it changed slightly just in this area here. I'm just going to go back to my selection tool. Let's change that to 90 degrees, and you end up with a very strange looking spiral, which is quite lumpy looking. Make it 5 degrees, and it's very, very smooth. When you finish that exercise, go to your Active Layer button and choose the next exercise or the next layer. The eyedropper tool.